Good morning, everyone. We are very close to getting started, awaiting our chair to arrive, but also a few more folks to meet what we think will be the quorum. We are streaming to YouTube, just so that you are aware, so members of the public can view the meeting.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair, we do appear to have
Good
the right
morning.
number. I think we have a couple folks that didn't make it over from the executive committee meeting yet, but we do look like we have the right number of folks to get started when you're ready.
All right. Well, for the sake of time, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to my favorite month in Virginia and my favorite meeting of the month. So very happy to be here. We got some great stuff to go over today, so let's get right into it. I will ask us to start by having our vice chair, Mr. Winslow, reading the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, we ready?
We are ready.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Winslow.
Neil, you went on mute.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I
That's what a good vice chair does.
was just
He backs you
going
up.
to say the same thing. And you are earning your stripes today. Thank you. So regarding the statement for electronic meetings for our meeting for October 8th, 2020, due to the 2020 COVID-19 virus, meetings in the Richmond Region Planning District Commission have transitioned to a virtual format in accordance with the provisions of Virginia Code 2.2-3708.2 and related legislation approved by the General Assembly of Virginia during the current period of the governor's state of emergency declaration for COVID. While we meet in a remote virtual format, we remain committed to the public accessibility and opportunity to participate. Staff provided notice of this meeting to members of the public on Monday, September 28th, 2020. As this meeting will be recorded, audio and visual recordings of the materials will be accessible through the PlanRVA website. Any member of the public participating as an observer during the meeting may submit comments or questions at any time via email at info@planrva.org. Additional information for how members of the public may participate are included in the meeting materials and on our website. For the members who are participating in the meeting today, we ask you to identify yourself first when speaking so we can accurately record the activities of the meeting. Please remember to mute your line when not speaking to minimize additional noise and feedback. You may unmute your line at any time to request acknowledgement from the chair. Staff will be monitoring the chat functions throughout the meeting to assure we do not overlook anyone wishing to participate as appropriate in the discussion. Does anyone have any questions regarding the process to assure effective facilitation of the meeting, of how members of the public may participate? If not, I will ask the staff to certify that we follow the approved procedures for the appropriate notice of the meeting and the means by which we are convening.
Yes, we have.
Thank you, Ms. Fusco. If you can proceed with the roll call vote, please.
Okay, starting with Charles City County, Mr. Cota, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Russell, Town of Ashland, Ms. Abbott, Mr. McGraw,
Here.
Goochland County, Ms. Lascalette, Chairman Spoonhour,
Here.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll,
I am here.
thank you, Mr. Davy,
Here.
Ms. Fry,
Here.
Ms. Haley,
Here.
Mr. Holland, Mr. Engel,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Winslow,
Here.
City of Richmond, Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Giovia, Ms. Gray, Ms. Larson, Ms. Lynch, Dr. Newbill, Mr. Poole, Hanover County, Mr. Davis,
Present.
Ms. Lorenzon, Mr. Peterson,
Here.
Ms. Pritchard, Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Henrico County, Mr. Archer, Mr. Brannon, Mr. Mackey, Reverend Nelson,
Here.
Ms. O'Bannon,
Here.
Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Thornton, New Kent County, Mr. Locke.
Mr. Thornton is here. I believe his microphone was off.
Okay, thank you. New Kent County, Mr. Lockwood,
Present.
Mr. Moyer,
Present.
Ms. Page,
Present.
Powhatan County, Mr. Byerly, Mr. Hall,
Here.
Mr. Nordvig.
Here. Good morning.
Thank you.
Commissioner Holland is present and accounted for.
Thank you. So noted.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Thank you, Ms. Fusco. Okay, are there any additions or changes to the order of business? I'm sorry, Ms. Heater, sorry, jumped the gun there. Are there any public comments that we can share?
Thank you. No, sir, we did not receive any public comments before the deadline.
Okay, and aside from myself changing the order, are there any additions or changes to the order of business? All right, hearing none, we will move into the meeting minutes. Mr. Norvig.
Yes, good morning again. You have in your packet electronically there the September 10th minutes. If anybody needs a few extra seconds to look over the minutes, feel free, just let me know. But otherwise, there were just a couple of minor changes made, syntax, grammar, that kind of thing, nothing substantive. I myself was only partially present because I was out of town taking care of my dad, so I'll be abstaining today, but I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from September 10th.
Sean Davis, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Fusco, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Mr. McGraw,
Aye.
Chairman Spoonhour,
Aye.
Mr. Carroll,
Aye.
Mr. Davy,
Aye.
Ms. Fry,
Aye.
Ms. Haley,
Aye.
Mr. Holland,
Aye.
Mr. Engel,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Winslow,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker,
Aye.
Reverend Nelson,
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon,
Aye.
Mr. Thornton, Mr. Lockwood,
Aye.
Mr. Moyer,
Aye.
Ms. Page,
Aye.
Mr. Hall, Mr. Nordvig.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Kristen Larson from the City of Richmond. I just wanted to let you know that I'm here. And if you could record an I vote for the minutes, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Larson. Thank you, Ms. Fusco.
And this is Kim Gray. I'd like to ditto that. I'd like to record an I vote for the minutes, and I'm on the line.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Welcome to both of you. All right, we're moving right along. We'll move into old business. Ms. Heater, we have some exciting ideas about voting.
Yes, I guess we did that last roll call vote for posterity's sake. At our last meeting, we had feedback from you about the possibilities that we could explore to streamline our meetings, to be able to reduce the number of roll call votes, and want to say thank you for the input that has prompted us to have several conversations with Mr. Gregory and others on the commission with recommendations. And so the executive committee did meet this morning and talked about this for a few minutes, and they have a recommendation to you that staff move forward with designing the agenda in such a way that we can combine agenda items that make sense to be included on a consent agenda, which could reduce the number of individually voted items. That, of course, would be also a mechanism that at your request, we could move items from the consent agenda if you need to discuss them further or vote on them singularly. In addition to that, Mr. Gregory, I think, is also on the call now, and he can outline advice about how the commission could proceed with a method of voting by acclamation, which would essentially enable you to vote for many items where the likelihood of the affirmative is there, but other folks who would enable us to do a roll call vote if necessary, if there was a dissenting opinion or if it was determined to be perhaps a controversial issue. I'll let other members of the executive committee chime in, but also Mr. Gregory is here if anyone has any questions. But I do think the executive committee is recommending those two methods to employ going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Heater. So to the body, what are any comments regarding this?
This is Commissioner Holland. I couldn't agree more. It doesn't make any sense to do as many votes as we are doing. I mean, it's almost, it just doesn't make good sense. Let me just say that categorically. We should have a consent agenda. I mean, 99% of the folk vote. If you want to comment, pull an item briefly, comment on it, and let's move on. But let's stop wasting that valuable time just voting a roll call vote. Doesn't make sense, especially even on the minutes, it didn't make sense just a few moments ago. So couldn't agree more. And I'm executive committee member Jim Howell.
Hi, this is Pat O'Bannon. One concern I have is that on occasion, as we've even seen this morning, some members can't they have a problem with the technical things. For instance, I had a difficult time joining the meeting.
Me too.
So, just to make sure that all voices are heard, if there is an acclamation, you have to give it enough time for somebody to say vote nay or whatever, or someone's waving their hands. You said there's one where you might wave your hands. Just be careful because the technology can sometimes trip you up. That's my main concern. We are not in the room together where we could, someone could just shout out something. So we have to be very careful with the technology. And I'm sure that's why the roll call vote, because as even we've seen today, sometimes can be technical issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Bannon. Other thoughts?
Have Larry Nordvik from Powhatan.
Yes, Mr. Harvey.
Yeah, I'm kind of echoing what Pat just said, and I said it in the executive meeting this morning, but the one about the visual, you have to be careful with that, whether it's looking into the camera and putting up your hand or, participants, there's a thing you can click to raise your little electronic hand or hit yes or no, et cetera. Somebody on a telephone would not be able to do that. And as I mentioned earlier this morning, sometimes out here in Powhatan, our internet is not as good as maybe in the thick of the metro area. I've got a couple of college age students living under my roof that also use Zoom sometimes at the same time. And there's a lot of business people out here in Powhatan that are working remotely. And so we'll get kicked off of Zoom a lot, and which is why I don't do a lot of visual right now. So again, to echo Pat, there are some technical difficulties. So we just have to be cautious. I'm completely in agreement with Mr. Holland that whatever we can condense, let's condense. But let's just be careful that all voices are heard. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? All right. Well, it sounds like we have a consensus to give this a shot. Hopefully, we won't be in this situation much longer, and we'll actually be able to be around a table together. But until then, I do love the fact that we are continuing to innovate. One of my favorite mantras is innovate to great. And I appreciate staff taking that feedback and actually coming back to us with some recommendations. So hopefully the commissioners realize voices are being heard and we are taking action. So thank you very much for that. Okay, we have, if nothing else, we will move into the executive committee and my report. Just want to talk about how excited, again, I am about the potential we have. I was thinking a lot about this over the last month, and as you know, from my last report, I moved here 25 years ago, and Richmond was a very different place. I moved here, and after about a month, I met somebody, and they said, you know how many Richmonders it takes to change a light bulb? I said, no. And they said, 100. They said, 1 to change the light bulb, 1 to hold the ladder, and 98 to talk about how much better the other light bulb was. That is not the Richmond we live in today. The Richmond we live, I only came here for 3 years. That was my intention, and I never left. I had planned on going back to Pennsylvania. But the Richmond we live in today is a much more progressive. We're on the map for our restaurants and getting known as a foodie capital. We have some of the greatest rural areas that are popping up with wineries and breweries, and just so many great things in our region. And we have a great opportunity here as this commission to really define the commission as with things like having gone through COVID and seeing some of the paradigm shifts we were able to do and how we can potentially work remotely and define who we want to be. And especially as we go and looking into a new space potentially, we have a real opportunity to define how we want our commission to be represented and how to be representative of a progressive region. So I'm excited about that. I hope you are too. And I look forward to working with all of us to really continue to define the vision for this commission and all the great work it does. Additionally, so that's hopefully some good news. Some not so great news. Mr. Davis informed us, Mr. Davis is currently our treasurer. He informed us that, and I'll let him kind of speak to this, but due to some work requirements, he's no longer able to serve as the treasurer. So we will need someone to ideally volunteer for that role this morning so that we can vote them in. I will assume I guess it kind of falls to me. I would really appreciate some help in this capacity. So Mr. Davis, is there anything that you wanted to say to the board before we see if we can get some?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. It certainly was not my intent. I'm sorry that I do have to resign as treasurer. It is not a time commitment. I am in the financial services industry and we deal with a lot of assets with our clients. And New York Life, the company I'm affiliated with, not only do we do life insurance, we handle a substantial amount of assets for our clients. And the company does not allow us to serve in a treasury
But I have my video turned off.
and that's and I mentioned this earlier, that's with a church or a civic organization or anything like that. They do not allow us to serve in treasury positions with organizations. So it's nothing to do with PlanRVA. I couldn't do that with my church or my Rotary or Ruritan Club either. So it's my deepest regret, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Davis.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Chairman Canova Peterson, also being from Hanover County, would Mr. Davis's resignation from treasurer take him off of the executive committee as well, or could he still serve on the executive committee?
I can address that. The choice of who serves on the executive committee representing Hanover County is Hanover County's decision. So from our perspective, Mr. Davis is welcome to stay. We would be looking for another member of the executive committee to fill that officer role.
All right. I will be willing to step up and as a fellow Hanoverian in that place for this year, assuming that Mr. Davis will continue in progression within the offices rather than myself.
This is Commissioner Holland. I support Mr. Peterson, Canova's being our treasurer. I think he'll do a great job.
For clarification for me, is the notion that Mr. Peterson, you would join the executive committee and serve as treasurer, or are you suggesting that you separate those duties and that Mr. Davis remain on executive committee and you serve as treasurer as a member of the body?
I have no problem with either way, but okay, as the progression goes from one jurisdiction to the other, I would like Mr. Davis is still the primary.
Understood.
His reason for dropping out obviously is very specific to treasurer, but I want he should continue on up through the chairs to the chairmanship.
Understood. I thank you for that.
If maybe possible, I should ask Mr. Davis if he's in agreement too.
Mr. Davis, are you okay with that?
Yes. Thank you very much. That was not pre-planned. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, Mr. Holland. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'd be willing to do that. Should it be the pleasure of the board?
Yeah.
I think Mr. Gregory wants to share.
Yes, Mr. Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the body. I think that's a laudable desire, and the bylaws provide that the officers shall serve on the executive committee. So the treasurer, by virtue of his office, is a member of the executive committee. I think it would be, certainly a great idea to have Mr. Davis continue on the executive committee. That's fine, but the treasurer is also a member of the executive committee. The Hanover could have two members of the executive committee. You could have the treasurer, Mr. Peterson, if elected at the next meeting, and then Mr. Davis, but I'm not sure that would be the desire to have two members from one jurisdiction on the executive committee.
That creates maybe 2 votes for Hanover, which I could not support that, however. It is Hanover's seat. It is Hanover's seat to fill. However, that would create 2 seats, 2 votes on the executive committee, which would not be consistent with our bylaws, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, Sean Davis, I completely understand that, and I have no problem with that. I can see where other folks would not like that, and I certainly support that. That is in accordance with the bylaws, and I agree with Mr. Holland on that. I wouldn't want to cause any contention amongst fellow board members. That makes perfect sense.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to clarify. I mean, I don't have a problem with filling in at this point. I just want to be clear that next year, Mr. Davis will be back on the executive committee and in the next chair.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't follow the person, it follows the county, correct? So
yes,
that's right.
That's correct. It's the county. However, That was 1 vote per county relative to the executive committee. As I understand it.
Sean Davis, agreed 100%.
So if I may, I might suggest this could take a little bit longer, but if Hanover County is in concurrence with this and notified us that they want to change the appointment for this fiscal year from Mr. Davis to Mr. Peterson on the executive committee, we could arrange for the election of Mr. Peterson for treasurer on the subsequent meeting agenda.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gregory, I will, as I serve as vice chairman of the Hanover County Board now, I'll work with the county administrator and the chairman to bring this before the board. We have our next meeting this coming Wednesday. We'll see if we can go ahead and get that on the agenda, and then we'll notify PlanRVA immediately. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Is there anyone else that would like to volunteer for the role of treasurer? Okay. Mr. Peterson, thank you so much. Mr. Davis, thank you for serving or being willing to serve as you have. Appreciate that. And with that, we will move to the Audit, Facilities, and Finance Committee report. Mr. Holland, Ms. Eckhout?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. Commissioner Holland. Certainly, I'll allow our staff to go over the finance report. And then, of course, hopefully with all questions. So, Terry, if you could go over the report, that would be greatly appreciated now. And I do want to say that we hope that we will continue to be financially prudent and that the numbers will continue to improve as we have over the last few months. So, Terry. Or Martha, either one.
Terry, I've tried to put the financials there on the screen for folks if you'd like to use that to go through them.
Let's see. As you can see on our balance sheet, we have a solid cash position of $981,894. That's, good to note that the 3 pending jurisdictions, Hanover, Powhatan, and Richmond, have paid their special assessment fees, so that all jurisdictions that were assessed a fee in fiscal year 19 have paid in full. And those dollar amounts are at the very bottom of this schedule. And it's listed under special assessments for fiscal year 21 for $30,122. For the month of August and July combined, there was a net loss for $29,682, which you will see those numbers netted against the special assessment fees collected. So, Martha?
Yes.
Did you?
You want me to pull up the slides?
Sure. There's been a slide deck prepared today that Martha is going to go over with you next.
So when we reviewed the financial statements with the Audit, Facilities, and Finance Committee members earlier this month, they gave us some feedback on things that might be helpful to share with you. So Terry put together these slides to give a bit more of an analysis to explain where we are. First and foremost, you note that Terry has highlighted a couple of sections on the financial statements and the profit and loss where there's a variance from what would be perhaps a predicted year-to-date position versus the actual. The first one that we'll highlight is the line number 4115. This is our Chesapeake Bay Watershed Implementation Plan program. We are showing an excess of revenue over our predicted year to date, and that's largely because this program does not follow the course of the fiscal year. It is a grant that expires at the end of December, so we are actually well on track with that particular program, and that's why it's ahead of schedule as it indicates on the financials. The analysis of impediments is also showing a pretty significant excess of predicted revenue, largely because we had originally expected that project to wrap up in August. It has been extended to March of next year. And so the adjustment to accommodate that will be made in the resolutions that will come before the committee and the full commission next month. And so we will see a reconciliation there so that that'll become back in line. But that project has been extended from August to March. In addition, the capital expense projects, this is an activity that doesn't flow on a sort of a monthly pro rata basis. We have made some improvements to our break room and kitchen, namely the installation and the replumbing to be able to allow the installation of a dishwasher so that when we are in the office, we can more adequately clean the dishes that we use for staff and for meetings and things like that, as opposed to hand washing them. So that project is the only thing that is scheduled, and it is complete now. My next slide includes, we had an instance where with our transition from the voice over IP system, from our analog telephone system to the voice over IP system in March, we had a billing issue that Diane and I are working through with the vendor. We have escalated it to our IT services provider as well, but we are anticipating a refund of approximately $1,000 to be able to address the overbilling and overpayment on the account for that service. The committee also talked about the VRS retirement contributions. There was an increase that was assessed to us, and so that increase represents a 3.78%. And the contribution rates were communicated to us, and so that will be also a part of our adjustments that we'll bring to the committee and the full commission for the budget review this quarter. Finally, the committee did also ask us to provide a listing of fixed assets. That's been provided, and we'll be going over that at the next meeting, but did just want to make sure that everyone knows that the committee is asked us to stay on top of, and they'll be reviewing our fixed asset list just so that we are making sure that that is accurately reflected on the balance sheet. Moving to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the fund balance projection. Despite the year-to-date net loss, we are still operating with an excess of the $1 million designated reserve fund. We do expect that the current year-to-date net loss reported in the August financials is a temporary net loss. Largely, it's due to a timing of receipt of funding through our General Assembly appropriations and local member dues. As Terry mentioned, we have collected all member dues or received a commitment of those funds. Some jurisdictions are electing, given the economic conditions, to pay on a quarterly basis instead of upfront, which we've agreed to. But because of that, there's a little bit of a timing issue. In addition to that, we did have a significant level of staff leave that occurred in August that's not typical for that month. And so we weren't able to bill as much of our staff time to our reimbursable programs. The chart here indicates that a little bit. As you can see, our blue lines are the month-to-date actual. They are still tracking to be less than the forecasted monthly salary budget. However, the share of the reimbursable salaries did decrease in August, and so that is also a contributor to that net loss for the month. I do expect us, Terry and I both expect us to recover, and we expect the September and October financial statements to start moving in the positive direction. This chart is just another look at that monthly salaries. Terry has provided that. As you know, our local member dues also contribute to the match on a number of programs, so she's allowed for that in this table. But essentially, as you can see, the share of salaries that were reimbursed were less in the current month over July. The leave was also fairly substantial in July, as you might expect as a summer month, but was higher than normal for us in August. And then staff time that was dedicated to projects that we would say are funded by local dues were also significantly different in August than July. So Terry is also on the call. She's done some significant analysis on this, but wanted to be able to provide these slides to you. As a reminder, the way that we record our revenues for General Assembly contributions, we record them on a quarterly basis as they are paid to us. So from a timing perspective, they don't always match up with the expenses incurred that are funded on the course of the whole fiscal year. That evens out and it matches, but quarter to quarter, it doesn't always match. The same for the local assessments. Our local member dues are recorded on a monthly basis, 1/12 of what is received for the year. So similarly, for those projects where local dues are a contributor for match or are funding the activities, again, they don't always match up month to month, but over the course of the year, we are tracking it to make sure that we don't exceed the total dollars available for any project. And then finally, our MOU with the Central Virginia Transportation Authority is pending. And so Terry has accounted for the expenditures that we've incurred on behalf of the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. Those are included in your balance sheet as a due from CVTA line, but they're not showing on our profit and loss statement yet because we do not have an agreement which would trigger a budget resolution to incorporate that for revenue. Terry, I hope I did okay in reviewing your slides, and certainly I'll defer to you for questions from the board.
Thank you, Ms. Heater. Thank you, Terry. Commission, do you have any questions for Terry or Ms. Heater?
Hi, this is Pat O'Bannon. I do have one. I know it was mentioned during the budget committee meeting, but the dishwasher, I just asking, was there, it's almost $6,000 because I guess you had to do plumbing, but when is their lease complete or up or finished?
Thank you. The lease agreement that we have for the space expires in October of 2022.
We're not even there. I mean, and I guess, are you having meetings at that location?
We have started to have meetings. The CTAC, which is the meeting that we host lunches, has not started to convene back in person, but we are slowly returning back to the office. Some staff are here on a regular basis, and we do plan to be able to move back into the office as soon as possible.
Well, did someone consider using styrofoam cups or paper cups? I mean,
we have purchased a supply of disposable items as well. Yes.
I know we have discussed the fact that the space we're in now is very expensive, and we've tried to negotiate it. And we considered other locations, and we're continuing to do that. And it's only a couple of years. So I hate to say it, I know you've already spent the money, but it does seem to be $6,000. I mean, the dishwashers today, I mean, plumbing and dishwasher it really come to $6,000.
Terry, can you advise if the entirety included in that line item is that, or if the other COVID related improvements that we've made are also included in that line item?
That line item is the dishwasher plus the cost to get the dishwasher installed. Those are the only costs in that line at this time.
It doesn't include the cleaning services that we had done as well?
That's in September.
Okay.
I guess, was that money from COVID money? I know there's some that's set aside for that, but that's not COVID money?
It's not CARES Act money. If that's what you're asking, we're not eligible to receive funding through the CARES Act, but it is money that was set aside in the budget specifically to make improvements to the office with regard to COVID. You budgeted $20,000 at the beginning of the fiscal year to make office improvements, and those are the only improvements that we've scheduled at this time.
Mr. Chairman, it's Canova Peterson here. Just a question, as far as that expense, that looks very high, but I'm assuming that we had to replace cabinets and all to do that as well. Is that correct?
Yes, we had to eliminate a cabinet unit, have that removed, and have it the sections, you know, don't always match with the dimensions of the dishwasher. So we bought a standard dishwasher to minimize that. And then the cabinetry had to be addressed. And then we also had to address the plumbing to be able to accommodate the new lines coming in.
Is any other, that money going to go to, what sort of things is the rest of the money going to go to? I mean, in the office, because I know at other locations, if you're meeting the public, which you don't at the office, they have, you know, plastic shields and that sort of thing. What other types of things will that money be used for?
At this point in time, we haven't identified any other activities for the balance of those capital improvements budgeted. We've made minor adjustments in the office to be able to spread our staff members out, assigning individual offices to most of our staff members, and have relocated furniture, closed down our meeting rooms and things like that so that we can accommodate that. But no other improvements. We did have the carpets cleaned earlier this year, and we did have the linoleum floors cleaned, but those are the only improvements that we have done and expect to do in the near term.
Okay, anything else for?
Will
Ms.
this
Beard?
come before the budget committee in the future, any expenditures? Because obviously cleaning the carpet when no one's there, I know it needed to be cleaned, so, but in the future or any other expenses in that line? I mean, if you would.
Sure, we could absolutely have the committee review any planned improvements. Sure.
And I would also like to reiterate that our capitalization threshold is $5,000.
So was this brought before any committee, the executive committee?
No, ma'am, but this item, you know, will be depreciated. But the smaller items under $5,000 are not going to be entering this line to be capitalized.
This method of depreciating $5,000 is consistent throughout local government in the region. I've served as in the financial capacity in most major organizations, namely the International Airport, Richmond Region Tourism, and I've recommended, in my case, it's normal to have $5,000. And that's a function of, again, the goals of financial organization. You don't want to be nickel and diming a $500 item. There was one organization in particular that I was the executive committee member, and they were depreciating $500, which doesn't make sense at all. So $5,000 is quite reasonable. I highly recommend it as a certified public accountant as well. Thank you.
Well, this was $5,900 for a dishwasher, even though it had to be repiped. Again, I just was concerned that that there wasn't any discussion to at least mention paper, plastic, styrofoam, you know, I mean, what would cost, because our lease is up in 2 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And we probably will move. Do we get to take the dishwasher, or does that become property of the owner?
It's our dishwasher, so we can move it and have it installed in a new place.
Check out the equation method here. Oops. Yep, there we go. Look at the next slide. Now look at
Anything else for, thank you, everyone. Any other comments for the finance team? If not, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
Tyrone Nelson, Michael County, so move.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
This is Commissioner Holland. I second that.
Thank you. And because this has to do with financial, I would imagine that we do need to do a roll call vote, Mr. Gregory, or can we do this by acclamation?
This is a merely acceptance of the financial statements. It's at the board's pleasure whether you want to do a roll call vote.
Mr. Chair, as chairman of the Finance Committee, I recommend we do by acclamation because we'll simply file it for audit.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holland. So we have, if no one objects, we have a motion and a second. Any additional comments? If not, All those in favor of entering these financial statements, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I see no, I see one hand sort of waving, but I don't think that's, all right, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great job.
Thank you, Mr. I appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Davey for the Public Outreach and Engagement Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see everybody. This is my first meeting as Chair of Public Outreach and Engagement. Obviously, this opportunity for me is to build on what Mr. Nordwig and his committee has sort of built to sort of establish, our brand, start the process of communicating what it is that we're about and what it is that we're going to be involved with. Obviously, in today's world, that's probably more important now than ever before. From the private sector's perspective, our firm's brand and how we communicate it and amplify what we're is exactly what Timmons Group is doing. And I applaud, PlanRVA for doing the same thing to try to make sure that we stay relevant, communicate with our stakeholders, communicate with our constituents, and make sure that everybody knows who we are and what we're about. I've got some exciting news that I'm going to allow Ms. Heater to present, because as chairman of the committee, obviously sometimes we're given the credit, but Martha's team has done all the work to share the exciting news that she's going to be able to tee up here for in a second. But what I think it's really important from my perspective to sort of share is that if we're going to navigate sort of the environment that we're in, our brand and what we do about our brand needs to be intentional. It needs to be relevant to the current times. And so what Martha's staff has done is to go to seek out some financial resources to try to make sure that we can continue to remain relevant and be very, very intentional in what we're going to be doing on a brand building and awareness perspective. So with that introduction, I'm very, very excited to sort of turn this over to Martha to go ahead and share some exciting news.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. I appreciate your comments. Just as a reminder, certainly our strategic planning process outlined this, but we have been very focused on identifying ways that we can engage the public in the planning work that we do. Certainly now more than ever, having a connection to the community and making sure that the public is involved in giving input to you as decision makers at the PlanRVA level, but also at the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization level with the Long Range Transportation Plan, our hazard mitigation planning activities, and several other areas where we seek to engage with and inform the public of the work that we do and how they can get involved is really important. So we did receive a grant from the Community Foundation of Greater Richmond in the amount of $50,000 to support our capacity building for public engagement. They have a very keen interest in promoting civic involvement among residents in the community and are particularly interested in the work that we're doing around transportation planning. And so I'm really excited about this. It's an opportunity for us to candidly think out of the box using more flexible dollars to be able to explore avenues to boost our opportunities to engage with the public, to build our capacity in the near term and the long term to be able to address current situation where we're rapidly working to try to do digital communication, online things, but in the future also to be able to get out into the communities. I know several of you, Mr. Thornton and others, Ms. Larson, have invited us to your district meetings to be able to interact with the residents in your districts, and we've really appreciated that. As soon as we're able to do that again, we want to continue to try to meet your constituents where they are. The committee has been really helpful in giving us ideas about how we can do that, and this capacity building grant will go a long way. Our intention is to be able to use the funds to develop a strategy. We'll be soliciting proposals from firms in the area to be able to help us develop a strategy for what that outreach can be. And then the intention would be to be able to carry that out through our staff capacity going forward. So the grant, while short term, we hope will leverage resources to be able to move us forward in a really exciting way. And I'll just say the committee will be getting back together again. We'll be sending a doodle poll out so that we can have that committee actively involved in overseeing this work and serving as a steering committee for the project.
Thanks, Martha. Mr. Chairman, that's really what we have to report unless there's any questions from members of the board.
Any questions for Mr. Davey? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Davey. Great first meeting. You set an incredibly high bar for announcements. I can't wait to see what you bring us next month.
Thanks for the challenge.
All right, thanks everybody. Okay, great. Ms. Heater, your report, please. You're muted, Martha.
Thank you. I just wanted to share a couple of announcements, things that'll be coming back before this board in due time. We are reviving the discussion about the charter amendments. So Mr. Gregory and I will be bringing a draft charter agreement back to you for consideration at your November meeting. We have been coordinating with the local governments, your local government, county and city administrative leaders, as well as the legal counsel on this. And so we'll be reviving that with them and making sure that there's direction from those folks to come back before you. The process will be that this body will need to approve submission of the proposed charter amendments so that we can move it to each of your local government governing bodies for consideration. The charter cannot be amended until all of the 9 member jurisdictions have had a chance to review it locally and approve the same set of changes. So as you know, we kicked this off last year, largely prompted by the desire to increase flexibility with regard to our space planning and future space needs efforts. And we've also had a request from the jurisdictions to address matters related to appointments and to be able to allow greater flexibility in how the jurisdictions appoint their members according to the voting structure. So those changes will be coming back before you. In addition, the Audit Facilities and Finance Committee is very busy this time of year, along with Terry. We will be presenting the audit at the October committee meeting for fiscal year 19. They will be providing then a summary report to you, and our auditor will be, we're tracking to present the fiscal year 19 audit, fiscal year 20 audit to you at your full commission meeting in November. In addition, that is the month that we'll be reviewing the quarterly financials for the year through September. So those revisions that I talked about in the financial report will be included. And it is the time of year where we discuss the preliminary budgets for fiscal year 22. As you likely know, your local governments kick off the budget process in the fall. And so in order to meet the submission deadlines for requests for next fiscal year, we'll be reviewing at least a preliminary budget with you. At this point in time, obviously, we're not expecting any increases to the requests that we make of the local jurisdictions, but we do have to put that documentation in place to submit to them. I think our first submission is generally due by Thanksgiving. Finally, I'll just note that the executive committee is working on review of our personnel policy. We have a number of changes that are working their way through the process. Executive committee members have had 2 meetings to be able to review the recommended changes. Mr. Gregory will be reviewing them this month as well. And our hope is that we'll be able to bring some revisions back to you this month. I'd be happy to share, they're included in the executive committee packets for last month and this month, but I'd be happy to share that link out to anyone if you'd like to look at the revisions as they've been shared so far. And we are hoping to be able to include those on the agenda for November. And then finally, we're working with the executive committee to talk through, and the Audit Facilities and Finance Committee to talk through future staffing needs. As you know, we are interested in being assuring that we have the correct staffing levels to meet our current workload needs. So the executive committee is contemplating a recommendation, hopefully to you, to authorize me to pursue filling a new position with the organization to help with board support, and would welcome any comments or suggestions or feedback with regard to that. So I'll just mention on a COVID related update, our staff has largely been working remotely. We have a handful of staff members that are here on a regular basis. I would expect that the Attendance back in the office will increase. Our staff members are eager to see one another face to face. While I'm sure we all have enjoyed the frenzy of learning new technology, it has been really nice. We had a little staff event outside last Monday, and it was really great to be able to see the group together again. And I think many of our folks are starting to think about how to build into their regular schedule, coming back into the office more regularly. Mark Bittner, Terry Eckhout, Diane Fusco, Sid Kumar, and I are here regularly. A number of other staff members are in intermittently when they need to use special equipment or need to meet with staff members. So we have, I think, sufficiently met the standards of the Department of Labor safety requirements. We've been through the assessment. We've been paying careful attention to the guidance that comes out, and we are currently hosting meetings on site for smaller groups that we can hold in our boardroom. So looking forward to that. And I just, I don't think that it can be said enough. Our staff has done a tremendous job during this time. Just like everyone else in the world, we had no notice and not a lot of opportunity to prepare to make this transition to remote work, and they have been phenomenal. I think, generally speaking, we've met all the same challenges that everyone has had with adopting new technologies, but I just really want to say thank you to our staff members who have done a great job. Our projects are running on schedule. We've seen no significant delays, that certainly none that our organization controls, and our state and federal partners have been tremendous to work with, and kind of thinking through the implications of everything, as I'm sure your local government staff members have done as well. Finally, I'll just conclude by saying that we really appreciate your support as we've learned new technology. You successfully all logged into the new meeting platform today, so thank you, and I apologize for those of you that had challenges, but I'll call attention to the fact that the group is smaller than it has been in the past. That's because the Zoom link is only sent out to our members and alternates and staff members who participate in the meetings. Members of the public are able to view this entire meeting through YouTube. And I would ask again that anyone who is able to would go to our YouTube site and subscribe and like our YouTube page. The number of likes and subscriptions that we have will boost us and will enable us to create our own unique URL, which will again help the members of the public who are trying to find us on that vast engine that is YouTube a lot easier than that really long URL that you see at the top of your agenda right now. So if you could help us with that, we would appreciate it. We are trying to lean into our social media platforms. So thanks to those of you that are liking and sharing our content. We see it and we appreciate it. And just thank you guys so much for the support that you're giving to our staff right now. We really, really appreciate it. That's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Heater. Were you going to go over the environmental and intergovernmental?
Apologies. Thank you. Yes, they are included in your packet. They are the monthly report, monthly summary of those reviews that have been conducted. And I believe they include the detailed summaries of the projects and where they occur and whatnot. So as a reminder, those intergovernmental reviews are part of our obligation to the state. It's one of our responsibilities that the General Assembly gives to planning district commissions. So on a monthly basis, we see a fluctuating amount of intergovernmental reviews and environmental reviews. Sarah Stewart and Sid Kumar and our team lead that effort, and they compile that data, but they also are responsible for transmitting that information during the month out to your local jurisdiction contacts so that they can review and give comment. So that's there for your information.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Heater. All right, now we'll move into commissioner comments. Anything from the body? Quiet group. All right, and with 1 minute to go, it looks like we are, I want to thank everybody for their participation again. Thank you for this new platform, Martha and team, and looking forward to seeing everybody next month. And if there are no objections, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.